Hey everyone, welcome to Can't Afford to Record, the YouTube channel where we figure out the art of audio production together. I'm Robby Miller, and in today's episode we're going to be catching up with Cory Bergeron. Talented producer, mixing engineer, and pretty much everything else in between. It was really cool hearing about how he started off on his dad's tape deck, and then finally saving up enough money to buy a MacBook Pro and then working on GarageBand. Now working in and out of professional recording studios and making amazing sounding mixes and recording in his home studio. Cory shares his thoughts on what makes a great sounding recording and mix, as well as sharing some insights on mastering and playing in his band Locket. Cory also has a really cool YouTube channel. You should check it out. It's called Cory Bergeron Recordings. I'm a subscriber and I love it because Cory uploads videos about audio production and stuff that really interests him in that world, as well as tutorials on how to get better sounding recordings and mixes. Now don't forget, there's also a podcast version of this conversation. So if you're not into the Zoom conference call quality of the video, no problem at all. Head over to Spotify or wherever you usually hear your podcasts and search Can't Afford to Record and you'll find it there. Big thanks to Cory for coming on the show. I really enjoyed doing this episode. I think you guys are going to love it too. Enjoy. Producer, mixer, audio engineer, guitarist for Locket, Mr. Cory Bergeron. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad, thank you. I'm not doing too bad. How are you keeping up? Because we are only really 10 or 12 kilometers apart. We both live in Ottawa. How are you doing, though, during all of this? If you're listening to this in 2025, by the way, we're here in 2020, which is a big year.
Yeah, so right now it's August, which I had to think about. I guess that kind of sums up how I'm doing because it feels like we're in this weird limbo period. Yeah, I'm holding up. I'm holding up fine. I was in Brazil right before this whole thing hit, and I came back on March 15th, which was like 2 days after pro sports stopped. So yeah, it feels like I've just been like kind of stuck in a limbo period. I can feel the weather's changing, getting a little colder now. It's feeling like it's transitioning into fall, so that feels human, being able to feel that some sort of change. But other than that, I've been keeping busy, and um, honestly, I live a somewhat hermit lifestyle, so it hasn't changed too much.
Yeah, I think we've sort of mentioned before that you're always used to being in a space with no windows.
Yeah, that wasn't a choice, and if I did have a choice, I would definitely put windows in. I'm actually a big fan of sunlight, contrary to all of my actions. But yeah, over the last 6 years or so, I have spent probably the majority of my time inside basements with no windows.
What you need to do is figure out an amazing sort of formula for a total glass studio that just gives a sound that no one else can create, and then everyone comes to you for all the work.
I've got it figured out. It's going to be a mixing studio, and I'm just going to use headphones.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Cory, I like to always start off the interviews with this question. So the first question is, do you remember a time when you couldn't afford to record?
A time where I couldn't afford to record. So yeah, I started recording. I'm gonna just kind of think back to when I started and kind of ramble on here, and then eventually we'll come to that answer. I started recording when I was in high school. I played guitar, and I was trying to start a band with some of my friends. They were interested in music, and one person kind of played drums, had a drum kit, and someone else said he could, scream and do metal vocals, and I was into metal at the time. So we kind of got that together, and eventually it came to a point where I was like, I want to record some of our ideas. We had never like actually jammed out a song. They're all just ideas in my head. And my dad grew up playing in bands and owns a bunch of guitars, and he used to be the guy that would record his band, and he actually has a 4-track cassette recorder. So my first kind of experience recording was recording to cassette. Now it wasn't anything serious. It was more like, you play the guitar, check it out, now you can listen back to the guitar. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy. And then he also, in that same time period, owned a Tascam DP01FX, which was like a digital multi-track recorder. It was like its own standalone unit. and it recorded to the hard drive on that unit. And so eventually there came a time where I wanted to record, and I think for a birthday or something, he bought me one of those. So that was like my first introduction to recording. And it was, yeah, I would just record demos on it. There's actually some of them still on YouTube to this day. And the funny thing is I couldn't figure out how to get the track loud enough, so I would take the file and I would plug it in via USB 2.0 to my computer. So you're basically like plugging in one hard drive to your computer,
Mm.
and then you drag the file onto your computer's hard drive. I would go to, I can't remember the name of the website, but it was like I would add gain on some sort of website by uploading a file to it, and it would just like totally distort it and make it super loud. And then I would take it back, and that would be my mastering process. So that's kind of how I started recording. So I don't know if there was a time where I couldn't afford to, basically because when I became interested in it, uh, I guess I got a birthday gift. Um, yeah, and then I guess just still kind of rambling on in this story here. When I got into the real world recording, like recording with a computer, when I was 16 years old, I got a job at Wendy's, and I really enjoyed my job at Wendy's, and I saved up 3 months worth of paychecks so I could afford to buy a MacBook Pro so I could use GarageBand so I could create dubstep, because that was around the time that dubstep hit the scene. And yeah, that was kind of like where I got into recording with the computer. And so I guess there was kind of maybe a time there where you could say I couldn't afford to record because it took me 3 months to save up to get a MacBook Pro.
Wow, that is a really great and inspiring story. Yeah, that's so cool. I guess my question is from that story and that experience is, um when you were doing your mastering process how old were you?
I must have been 15.
Did you know what mastering was? Or did
No,
you
it
just want
wasn't.
it louder?
It was exactly that. It was like when I put this on my computer in iTunes, and this was probably around the time where iTunes had like a green logo versus like the blue one that they had, you know, um, it was just quieter than all of the other, commercial music that I had in my iTunes library. And I, I'm trying to think back as to what 15-year-old Cory was thinking, but I'm sure when I think the first track, and it's still on YouTube, it's unlisted. I still have access to it. And it was like a joke song I made with my friends. And, and, I recorded it and I uploaded it. And I remember like it went, I'm going to use the word viral, like throughout my high school. Like it probably got like 300 views in 24 hours.
Wow.
Like my entire, because in high school I was kind of like a class clown, and my friends were all class clowns. So we made like some joke song. It was just like some really passionate love song, but it was just like a joke. And I just remember like some girl the next day at school telling me, she's like, "It's really quiet. It's really quiet," and that sent me on the route to make the track louder.
But isn't it like amazing how man, so detached at that point from where you are now, from what you know about audio engineering now, from what you know about mastering now.
Yeah.
You still knew that that track needed another element, but you just didn't know what it was called, or really, in many ways, had to do it, how to do it. So you had to figure it out. You had to put it into a really sketchy website to add some volume to it, and then, but you knew that that's kind of what it took, or what you were able to do. Um, do you think that we lose a sense of that now? Do you think we overthink things now, where it's like, oh, it has to have this on it because, of course, everyone has their mix with that thing on the master bus, but really, would we have put it on it intuitively, I guess?
No, I think that especially like in that very specific discipline of, mastering or getting the track louder, I think that is like a relational thing.
Mm.
Like you make a song, I make a song, and then thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people make songs, and then over time it's like, oh, this person's song's louder than mine, and oh, should there be some sort of standard to this? And then the was it late 90s, early 2000s, the Loudness War comes in, and that kind of uh, sets the example um, that we kind of see today. It's still continuing in most genres. I think I think the really beautiful thing from that story is when you are younger, when you're not, trying to turn this into a career. At no point was I thinking this is a career. I was like 15 and probably could only see, maybe 12 hours into the future at any
Yeah.
given time. Um, there's just kind of like a beauty in just like the creation and stumbling through everything and running into those issues. You could chalk that up to being like inexperience. Like I made a song, it was quiet. Some girl told me that it was too quiet, and I probably really valued her opinion at the time. And then through that experience, I addressed all of my future work to make sure that it, was an appropriate volume. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Um, we're going slightly in a direction that I probably would like to save till later, but maybe we'll just
Cool.
go to it now though. And that is, we hear a lot about this loudness war and whatnot. I'm interested to know your take on it as someone that does master music as well as mix music and so forth.
Um, yeah. What can I say about it? Music is loud, music is bright, music is wide. You can tell if you reference, let's say, a rock track from today to, you know, back in the day. Actually, I listened to Back in Black the other day. It holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
But you listen to um, just modern music versus music that was made decades ago, and you can tell that. The loudness war, I don't think it. Well, I know it doesn't matter because if you're a mastering engineer now, you would know that different platforms require different loudness. So Spotify has its own standard, YouTube has its own standard, and if you go over that threshold, they will actually turn your music down. So they level it out. So I think when it comes to the loudness element of mastering, I think it's more important and less important at the same time than ever. Because if your master is too quiet or too loud, Spotify will regulate it, and that setting defaults for anyone that uses Spotify. So any normal consumer will have uh there's some name for it, but it basically makes every track the same volume. In terms of like the dynamics you lose by making a song super loud and that whole debate with the loudness war, I think it's kind of forced people to create really tight mixes because a mastering job can only be as good as not as good, but it can only be great if the mix is great. And if you have any like washy low end or just something not sitting right in the mix, it really limits the mastering engineer's ability to make it sound good. And if you want something to sound wide, super bright, and super loud, it's got to be mixed in a way that works. So I don't know what point I'm really getting at here. I'm not afraid of it, and when I master stuff, I get it loud. And sometimes I'll have clients that'll say, "Hey, can we get it at negative 14 uh, dB full scale?" And I will satisfy their needs, but if not, I'll just like get it as loud as other reference music and not think too much about it.
Right. It's really hard not to sometimes think though louder is better.
Yeah, I think it's really important when if you're changing anything sonically, if you're EQing, if you're compressing, if you are mastering a track, if you're mixing a track, to make sure that you are level balancing, because even a 1 dB difference in volume is just going to have this perception that it sounds bigger and better, but it's just you're being tricked by the loudness.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. I really don't know much. I mean, I get the process of mastering, but yeah, it's as someone that is still very much a rookie and just enjoying learning about mixing and how audio works. Um, I fall into that trap all the time of like, oh, there's a there's a limiter on the master bus now. It sounds great. It sounds exactly where it should be.
Yeah,
Um, where there's actually it would be better in the long run if I did a lot more work inside the mix
definitely.
to achieve that thing.
I've had a couple experiences, and I think this is a positive experience, where a client that it's usually a friend of a friend, or there's some sort of relation with them, they'll send me a mix and they'll say, "Hey, are you able to master this?" And usually the reason why they like their thought process is, I will record my song, I will mix my song, and then I'll send it for mastering, which is the cheapest one of the pieces of the production, and then it'll get some level of quality at the end there, and I'll have saved money and also achieved a quality project. That's like the mindset. But I've had people reach out to me for me to master their track. They'll send me the mix, and I'm like, I don't think I can make this sound much better. There's balance issues in your mix that I cannot address by throwing EQ and compression and a limiter and maybe a little bit of stereo width or whatever on it. So I'll just propose. I'll be like, yo, if you want, you can hire me, and I'll also mix your song and master your song. And if it's a friend, I'll maybe give them a slightly discounted rate or whatever. And then if they don't bite on that, and again, my goal here is just to help them make the best sounding music.
Yeah, of
It's not
course.
just to double up on making more money.
Yeah.
If they don't bite on it, I'll offer to do a test mix for free. Just so they can have the peace of mind of knowing, like, okay, like this is what I could be getting, or these are the issues I could be having. Again, all with the goal of just trying to make the best music. To just kind of keep going down this mastering thing, interesting story that popped into my head. So with my band Locket, I mixed the record, but it was mastered by Mike Tucci, who is a mastering engineer out in LA, and he does great work. I try not to master releases that are going to vinyl, because there is a vinyl mastering process that can be done that you need like the physical equipment to do to like create a test press and stuff. And I would rather leave that up to the people that specialize in that. And Mike does a great job. And then after he mastered that was all cool. We loved his work. We put out different or more music in the future. And I had this interesting experience where he actually mastered the track and sent me a live feed of just the audio while we FaceTimed at the same time. So I could hear every move he was making. And so he's worked with some of the biggest artists on planet Earth. And I'm not going to name drop.
You can name drop if you want, Cory.
In this case, I can't.
Okay.
He worked on a project. He didn't get the official credit, but the guy might be running for president. Yeah.
Sure.
So, and yeah, the interesting experience about the whole thing is I was listening to him master track in real time. He did a great job, but everything he did would be stuff that I would do. Like I could hear like, oh, he's applying compression. He's EQing. It sounds like there's some stereo width happening. It sounds like the vocals coming a little bit farther forward. And it really like settled my nerves of like, what is this pro mastering engineer? What moves are they making? What crazy behind the scenes stuff are they doing? It's like, oh, these are all tools that I have that I know how to use. And it kind of, yeah, I don't know. It gave me,
it validated what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. It just like it calmed me down. I was like, okay, yeah. I can do this.
You got this.
I'm not afraid of this.
Well, Cory, as you are someone that, did save up his Wendy's paychecks to get a MacBook Pro and record on GarageBand, to someone that is now, an amazing, well, everything that I've heard that you do and watch what you do, and we're going to talk about your YouTube channel very soon as well. What you create, what you make, just sounds absolutely incredible. I guess I'm just interested to know some defining points in that journey where you were making, and I might say this rather crudely, like not great sounding mixes to,
oh yeah, they're out there,
to really great sounding mixes. And I am, sometimes it frustrates me. I watch videos after videos. I read. I'm unfortunately have fallen down the plugin rabbit hole. I've done everything I'm always trying new things. How can I improve what I do? But maybe you have some insight for me and other people listening. So can you tell me, can you find the point where you did a mix for either your band or a band you were in or a friend's band, and you were like, this is a different level now to what I did even last week?
Yeah. And it sounds crazy, but I feel like I still have those moments. They're much smaller.
That's great though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really important, is if you really pursue this and take it seriously, at no point do you stop learning. At no point. There's just like little tips and tricks that you're always learning. And once you start talking to people that are on a similar level to you, you can really you can just gain a lot of information on the mix isn't getting 20% better. It might be getting 2% better, or there's just, you create a new way of making the vocal sound just this much sweeter or whatever. But you're always learning. But to take it back and to answer your question, yeah. So I have been doing like professional recording, freelance, also working for a recording studio, whatever, for since I was like 18. Now, when I was 18, it was like 2, 3 projects a year, and now it's obviously full time. It's everything that I do. And yeah, if there's a ton of music that I have worked on that sounds absolutely terrible, and terrible for different reasons, and you can really see the progression. There was one project in 2014. I used to play in a band called Old Rules, which was an Ottawa band, and it was members from a bunch of different Ottawa bands. And that really, that was actually a really important time in my life because it kind of set me up in a lot of ways for where I am now. And you can only realize that when you look back on it. But I was, they were really talented musicians. Like, they just knew how to play their instruments, and recording them was effortless because you just throw a microphone anywhere near them and it sounds good because they know how to play their instruments. A drummer knows how to play dynamically. And, you know, if you throw one microphone in the room, he's going to make sure that his kick, snare, and hi-hat are balanced, and he's hitting his crash cymbals appropriately and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a grungy rock band. Guitar player's tone was like awesome. I ended up buying one of his main distortion pedal because he was selling it, and that's the same one that I still use to this day. So, and that's just some old 90s Proco Rat. It's like $100. It's nothing special.
Nice.
But so leading up to that point, I don't know, I worked on a bunch of projects and they all sounded good and bad for different reasons. And then I remember working on that one, and I just remember it coming together like easily, easily. And I can look back on it now and recognize that it was the musicianship. The musicianship fit like puzzle pieces, but I didn't recognize at the time. I thought I was getting better. You know, maybe I was by 1%, 2%, but the performances and like just the source material was just good. And actually, so I play in a band called Locket, and Locket used to be called Safe to Say. So before I was in Safe to Say, they were in town about to play a show in Ottawa. And I had already knew the guys. We had played shows when I was playing in this other band, and they came into the studio and they were super impressed by the way everything sounded. And from there, I was able to basically, okay, so the day starts, I'm recording some vocals on the track, I'm mixing the track. Safe to Say shows up because they're about to play a show in Ottawa. Most of them live in Toronto, and they hear the track. They're like, wow, this is cool. They go play their show. The band leaves. They all go to hang out. I stay in the studio. I work like 8 hours trying to get this mix to work so I can bring it to them later, meet up with the whole band after everyone's hanging out at someone's house, and just be like, yo, check this out. And I do that. And then they're like, yeah, this sounds awesome. This sounds awesome. And from there, the singer of Safe to Say ends up reaching out to me, and he's like, yo, would you be interested in mixing our next project? Which, from the work that I had worked on, this is like 10 levels higher than what I should be working on. So that opened that opportunity. And then I ended up recording that entire project as well and joining the band in that process. And then I think that was an EP that came out in 2015. That was called Hiding Games. Hopefully the story's making sense. I'm kind of rambling in circles here.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
So worked on the Old Rules release. That led me to the Safe to Say release. That ended up being the EP called Hiding Games that came out on Side One Dummy Records, which is a label based in LA, as well as New Damage Records, which is owned by Dynalone here in Canada. So it ended up getting the band signed. And I think the EP has, I don't know, somewhere 500,000 plus streams kind of thing on Spotify. And yeah, that was just like what really kicked the door down and kind of put me into this, I don't know, into this world a little bit more. And then more projects started coming in. And yeah.
So do you think the pressure of having to record Locket and those sort of things just helped up your game? Like it's a little bit like when you get those gigs or tours, isn't it? When you know that you can do it, you just haven't done it, and now I got to learn 25 songs perfectly, and but I know I can do it, and once I've done it, that's me. I've leveled up. I've just, I'm now ready for the next project or other things on that kind of thing. So do you think that that's what happened with that Locket situation, or things around then. You just had to, I don't want to say had to get better, but things, maybe you were in a different frame of mind and that helped things as well.
Yeah, naively, yes. Like I probably thought I was ready for the opportunity, and there's a really interesting phenomenon where you think you know, like you don't know everything, but you think you know a lot, and then the more you learn, the less you realize you know.
Yeah.
Like you just keep learning, and you're like, wow, there's so much out there that I don't know. You're like unlocking new things that you should be new awareness to like build on, to be like, oh, I need to I need to start learning about every single type of snare skin head, right? Like you just like get deeper and deeper and
Hmm.
deeper and deeper. Um, so yeah, at the time I think I was maybe 20 years old too. So I was young, and I was just like say yes to every opportunity, and then work and make it happen. You know, sleep on floors, do whatever you got to do. I ended up taking a bus to Toronto because that's where the recording was happening. I slept on a floor the whole time. I didn't get paid for it either. I was like, oh, I want to do this. Just let me do this. And I mean, yeah, it all ended up working out. But yeah,
No, I
yeah,
think it's important to be yes people for a lot of those situations, there's definitely been situations where something's come into my lap and I've been like, absolutely no problem, by tomorrow.
yeah,
And then I'm like, well, I guess I know what I'm doing today. And it's figuring out how I can do that for tomorrow.
exactly. Yeah, a lot of I guess success from being like living a creative lifestyle. So whether it's recording, writing, performing, making internet content, whatever it is, it's a lot of just like setting those goals, or having people ask something of you and just like figure out how to do it right, do a good job, and get it done and move on to the next thing. And yeah, taking those opportunities. I I think back, if I didn't, something as simple as me not finishing that mix and going to hang out with the band afterwards and showing it to them could literally like I might not be sitting in this chair kind of thing. It could have like
Mm.
totally changed a lot of things. So I know your initial question was probably more about a production thing, but that I guess that's I ended up answering it in more of a career way.
Well, I think you answered it in the way that you believe the answer is, and that is exactly what I want. So yeah, um, that's awesome. I guess um, another question I have for you then, sort of relating to it and going back and forth, when you hear mixes by people that are just getting into this game, um, what do you often hear that is a lacking element where you're like, yeah, I know where you are, buddy. I've done everything
Yeah.
you've done. And this is just where you need to go next. But what do you think like makes someone's mix sound like it's a basement mix? Not to say, which I hate using that word these days because everything's made in a basement and
I
it's
was gonna
just
say all my mixes are basement
yeah, and
mixes.
it sounds amazing. So I mean, take that with a pinch of salt.
Okay, I think the two biggest things that I commonly see, and I work predominantly on rock music, so this might relate to rock music more than any other genre, are a mismanagement of low end and really amateur uses of reverb.
Yes. I went through a phase, Corey, where I hated anything to do with the reverb. I like the amp at the time that I bought didn't have a reverb channel. I never wanted reverb on my vocals when I did a gig live because I guess I heard as an amateur probably at the time as well so many bad uses of reverb. I was like, no, I don't want this on anything that I do. Now I'm a little different. I like reverb a lot, but
Yeah, reverb is there's even like mixes that I've been working on this week where I'll get sent a rough mix, or someone will hire me and they'll just, or someone will just reach out and send me something and say, "Hey, how can I improve this?" And or actually, this is the example I was thinking of. Someone will send me a Pro Tool session be like, hey, can you mix this? And they'll send me the full Pro Tool session. So they're basically like, start where I left off. And usually 99% of those cases, I delete everything that's there and start from scratch. I might bounce down a rough mix because it is nice to know what the artist, uh, was going for. And when you're like, does the guitar need to go up? Does it need to go down? Does it need to go up? And you start getting into like the nitty details. Having that reference mix helps give you some sort of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, too long of decay times. Like you just have this super washy reverb, like muddy sounding, like not bright. A lot of like tubby 200 to 400 hertz, like just like low end that eats your mix alive. And then on the low end side of things, like not having an appropriate kick and bass guitar relationship is messy. In the drums, if there's a ton of low end in the room mics and stuff, that's just like making your mix have a ton of like junk on the sides that's make your mix not feel wide and bright and in your face. That there's a million things, really. Everything could go wrong. You could have really like bad guitar tones. I guess, okay, one of the major things as well, kind of touching on the low end, is not getting your drums and your bass set properly. Every time I mix a rock bass track, it's like I picture it like building a house. Without a proper foundation, you don't have anything to sit on. So you have to get your drums and bass feeling good, and you'll spend 75% of the time doing that. And then the guitars and vocals should sit on top of that pretty easily, if you've done it correctly. And usually it's just kind of carving out a little bit of low end out of those mid-range and the vocal, the guitars and the vocal, to just kind of get them to sit on top of it. Yeah. So
how many mixes do you think you sort of did before you started to figure that stuff out?
that's a good question. I think maybe in like 3 years ago, I started referencing. Okay, actually, I can't give you an answer on how many mixes it took, but in 2014, I was hired to do that Old Rules EP, which was 3 songs. So the one I was talking about where I spent all this time on the mix, and another band, there's a band called Pine, and I did a 3-song EP for them at the same time. It took me 6 months for both projects to mix those 3 songs. Like
Wow.
6 months for one, 6 months for the other. They're constantly like, yo, dude, what's going on? That is that is offensive. That is way too much time. And what I would do, and at the same time, it's almost part of the success. If I look back on them, they don't sound great, but they don't sound absolutely unlistenable. It's because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have the experience, and I would just keep referencing other music. So it was just like, it doesn't sound right yet. It doesn't sound right yet. And I just kept changing things. And I would never recommend that to anyone, because you're just going to go insane. You're going to totally lose reference on the track. But I spent all this time. So whereas today, I can mix 3 songs in a day, no problem, as long as everything's prepped and, I'm not chasing down a file or having to tune something or whatever. Like, as long as the session is prepped, mixing doesn't take very long if you're all set up and you know what you're trying to go for. So I think it took like 3-4 years of spending way too much time mixing tracks to try and get them to just be like up to a certain level of quality before I could kind of easily get them to that level of quality, or kind of know the clear route of how to get there. Yeah.
So, I guess another question off that then is, how easily are you able, like, how easily are you able to move on from stuff now? Like, can you hear something you did a year ago? So we're sort of bringing the gap, we're bringing the gap down closer
Yeah.
now. Can you hear stuff a year ago and be like, ugh, no, I wouldn't have done it like that now? And then
Definitely.
how much do you do that? I mean, like, you can't let that take over your life, right?
Yeah. When you work on a project, you're always going to hear things that other people don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not even be like good or bad, but you have just a different relationship with that music. You know the guitar that was used for it, you know the string size that was used for it. You are so familiar with how that guitar player, like, let's say you're you also recorded the track. Um, you know how the drummer hit his cymbals, you know exactly what cymbals he used. So you're like, should I have used, this cymbal instead? Or like, you're like thinking of it in a completely different way, where someone that's just enjoying the track is like, oh yeah, this is a nice track. Um, I've had both experiences where I listen back and I'm like, how did I not hear to turn the bass down? Like, how? How
Wow.
did no one tell me? How did I send this
Yeah.
to the band and they okayed it? And then I've also had stuff where, like, I can listen back to my band's album and appreciate it, because it's been so long that I forget a lot of the moves. I forget the thought process and the decision making. So it's actually music again. And so usually it takes like 2 years for me to stop avoiding listening to it at all costs, because it will make me pull all my hair out,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can appreciate it. And even it is fun to go back and listen to some of my really early work, like stuff that sounds terrible. And there's just a couple like projects in there where you're like, you know what, this actually isn't that bad.
Yeah. I think I my buddy Matt just sent me a video by I don't know if you watch the Eric Valentine
Oh yeah,
stuff on
yeah,
YouTube.
he's the king.
Yeah, he is the king. He does this one with Slash. He talks about this record he did with Slash. And he's like, yeah, I opened up the mix. I did another mix on it, and to be honest, it's like 10 times better than what's on the record. And I'm just going like, wait, you mean the one that's on the actual record, the one that all those millions of people have bought?
Yeah,
And he's like, yeah, I just hear it differently now, and this sounds like what I've just done like in the past couple of days sounds way better than what I did then. And I was just thinking, wow, Eric Valentine, how like that's a great example of vulnerability and being willing to be like, I mixed Slash and I remixed it, and now that's not as good like what I was paid and hired for. Like that
yeah,
takes a lot, doesn't it?
yeah. I'm sure it's a lot easier to be like that if you have a couple gold records under your name, when you've
Probably,
already
yeah.
achieved it all. And yeah, no, I'm a massive fan of Eric Valentine, and have been for years. For any nerds out there, check out his Undertone Audio stuff. That's his company that they create like audio gear, and I mean, it's just like it's next level. It's everything is one thought after where everyone else has finished thinking. Like he's got a patch cable that you can change the impedance of it, which like has a dramatic effect on your guitar's tone. And he figured out in the studio over decades of recording that different patch cables sound different. He's like, why? And then he figures out a solution for it. He's got preamps that are just like they have every single variable that you would ever need. So like you just need this one preamp. He's got a console that is built out of a porous material, so there's no reflections off the console from the speakers coming to your ears. So you get a cleaner listening. All this stuff. It's just like next level. Big fan of Eric Valentine.
Yeah.
And
That's a lot of stuff to take in, isn't it?
yeah, real nerdy
Meanwhile,
stuff.
I'm still just trying to go like, yeah, is the kick there? I guess.
Yeah. Is it coming through? Is the mic on?
Can I even hear it anymore?
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and your Patreon page. What you do on YouTube is actually really inspired what I'm trying to do as well. In a few different ways, but mainly also from whenever I watch your videos, let me take a step back. When I watch a lot of audio videos to get better, I end up feeling I end up not feeling well, I'm trying to think how to explain this. I end up feeling dumb when I
Okay.
finish them. That's my biggest problem. It's like 10 EQ mistakes you're making right now. And
Yeah.
it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh my God, 10 of them? Like, does it have to be 10? Oh God, I am making all those mistakes. But then you realize, like, well, this is too subjective to really throw that sort of statement out there, but you still end up watching them. But what I really like about your videos is that you have this sort of throw and go thing, even like when you do sort of explanation about compression or something like that. It's very much like, here's the mix. This is, I'm going to dial it in. This is how it sounds, and these are my settings, and I recommend doing this, and that's now it's ready. And it's
Yeah.
kind of, you have this very laid back approach, and sort of whenever I finish watching them, I always think, okay, I could actually do that now. I can't, but you make me feel like I can.
Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time obviously working on audio, watching a million videos on the internet. I also went to college for music industry arts, which is basically a 1-year production course. So I got a lot of technical know-how from there. But yeah, I just have a lot of experience. I've been doing this like full time, and 25 hours a day for many years. And yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you said throw and go, because that is like when I'm working on stuff, compared to maybe someone that's just starting out, there might be a lot more thought in like, okay, I'm going to move this knob. Okay, how's that affecting the sound? Me, it's like, this needs to be brighter. Crank. This needs to be more compressed. Crank it, and then just like moving on, not
Yeah,
thinking twice about it.
you have
Um,
that confidence that that's really where I'm starting to work towards now. I've just put out a video. This dates the podcast a little bit now, but I just put out a video that I'm, because I'm trying to, on this channel, trying to do timestamps of like, this is where I am on compression right now. I hope that in a year I'm going to be way better at this kind of stuff. But it's almost like I'm like trying trying to do
yeah,
it's like I think that's better. For those who
yeah.
are listening to the audio version of this, I was wincing and looking through my eyes and reeling back in horror while I was trying to change the controls of a compressor.
There was real fear. I think one of the last times we spoke, I brought up a point that I think is worth mentioning. There's an engineer called, or whose name is Jordan Valeriat. I believe he lives in Hamilton or somewhere in Ontario, but he's worked on some notable alternative music. Yeah, he's worked on some notable alternative music, and he made this one. He's got a YouTube channel called Hardcore Mixing Studio, and he's got a lot of really valuable information on there. And one of his, I guess, like part of his philosophy is like, you have to be willing to go extreme when you're like tweaking knobs, if you're EQing something, to know where the line is. You
Mm.
see a lot on the internet. You see people only turn up 6 dB, or only compress only 6 dB. I've seen things like that, like these hard rules that don't make any sense. uh, I like Jordan's mindset, because it's something that I've naturally come to as well, is take the knob to the extreme. You have a vocal, you want that vocal to be bright, you want it to be a nice airy pop vocal, crank it. Oh my god, that is way too sibilancy. Dial it back, boom, there's the sweet spot, keep going. And it's the same thing with compression. It's the same thing with reverb. Is like, take it too far, but because by taking it too far, you will understand where that line is and you can pull it back. If you are inching towards the line, you'll never know if you're quite there. So just a little bit of a tidbit
Yeah,
that,
and that I've actually been doing that since we spoke before, and you mentioned that, and it definitely helps. I feel like it does give you that it does give you the confidence you need um to make those moves, because we're all trying to be very careful. But I have to sometimes think, as a guitarist, if I was like setting up my amplifier, I'd be like, I want it to sound like this: boom, 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 turn up, crank.
yeah,
Here we go.
exactly.
So you gotta take that mindset into that. Tell us a little bit more about your Patreon page, because I know that you've got a Patreon set up. You upload full mixes to it where people can work on stuff, and I believe people can even reach out to you and you can do one-on-one sessions.
Cool. Okay, so my Patreon page kind of works in tandem with my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel is everything audio production. Um, yeah, anything I think is interesting, I'll post on there. One of the video series I have on there is called In the Mix. So basically, once I have worked on a production, whether I was hired to produce, engineer, and mix it, or if I was just hired to mix it, um, if I think it's noteworthy, if I think there's stuff in there that people could learn from, if there's a cool story behind it, I will create an In the Mix video for that track once it's released. And then I basically open up the Pro Tool session on my side, and I go through every individual element. I talk about it, and basically talk about anything that is noteworthy. And then what I do is, with my Patreon page, I make it so if you become a patron, which I believe the tier is, it's a $3 tier. That's what Patreon recommended me to set it up as. for, I don't know how they came to that number, but they said $3 is what we recommend. And I said, okay. So if you sign up and you become a patron, you can actually download the multi-track to the In the Mix videos. So in effect, what you can do is you can become a patron on the Patreon, download the multi-track, attempt to mix these songs yourself, and then when you get stuck, you can watch my YouTube video and see how I did it. You can use my mix as reference, and then also I'm a very accessible guy. You can hit me up on any sort of social platform, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me there, especially if you are a patron. So yeah, that is the first tier that I have on the Patreon page, where you can download those multi-tracks and basically use them as practice to improve your mixing. I think it's important to practice with what I call professional multi-tracks, because it's already eliminated a lot of the errors that may be in like someone that's just recording for the first time. And you can also see how someone that's worked on a lot of projects arranges a track and organizes stuff. And then the next tier on my Patreon page, which is a little higher, is basically just one-on-one production lessons tailored to you with me. So let's say you are struggling with drum editing. Let's say you are struggling with vocal tuning, or you're struggling with one specific part of your mix. If you want to just hang out with me for half an hour to an hour on, a Zoom call, we can talk audio, and I can give you actionable feedback on how to kind of progress and what I would do in that specific situation to help you kind of improve your mixing. And I think it's really valuable to get that level of clarity. And yeah, that's my Patreon spiel. That's it.
Excellent.
How did I do?
While you were doing it, I was pretty much signing up myself. Yeah, it was perfect. No, it's really good, and it's nice that you're an accessible person. You're more than happy to give tips and insight. I mean, to be honest, you guys, if you're not subscribed to Cory's channel, that's where you need to start, because there's just an overwhelming amount of information there that you can go and learn from. So definitely start there and see what Cory's up to. I always look forward to every Monday where I get a new video from Cory and see what you're up to. I think this one was this week was it the microphone one?
That was last week. This week I did a video about guitar strings.
That's right. I watched it. Yes. Yeah.
I came out with, it's so funny. I basically was like, I got some strings for my guitars, and it's been long overdue that I need to change the strings on all of my guitars. I've made it through half of them, but there's only a select few that I use like in everyday production if I'm hired to write a song or anything like that. I have 2 guitars with Evertune bridges, and those are my working guitars. So I've been writing a lot of music for people and working on demos over the last couple months. And the last set of strings I actually had on my PRS guitar that has an Evertune on it was put on by a band that I was working with like months and months ago. So that was the last time it was restrung. And so I'm restringing a different guitar. I'm like, this could make a good video, because I'm restringing it with the intent of like, I know I'm going to be tracking with this, and I want it to be, fresh, bright strings. As a guitar player, the feeling and the sound of new strings. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'll make this video. So the goal of the video was to play or record a song with the old strings, restring it, record the same song, same parts, play it the same way, and just kind of hear the sonic differences. Obviously, it's 2 different performances, so there might be a little bit of a variable there, but it's power chords. So you're playing at the same intensity. You're just, turning it up to 10 and hitting the strings as hard as you can. So yeah, I do that. And then the conclusion is that the difference isn't that big. Now, I will say, and I think I included this in the video, I haven't gigged with those specific strings. And I find when you gig, there's a lot more grime and sweat and dirt that gets in the strings. And that's when they like really, really, really get dead and they start, turning a gray color. There was definitely like gunk on the strings that when you run your fingers across it. But so I have to dig deeper on that. I might make a follow-up video next time I have some really gunked up strings and see what the big difference is.
Dude, honestly, if I had it my way, I'd have a new set of strings on a guitar every day. I love new strings so much. And sometimes if you go a couple of days from a lot of playing, and they're sort of rusty and you're starting to question, have I had all the right shots? Because these strings are really gross, and I love it.
I have 2 guitars down here that are missing strings. So that's the point I usually get to before I change them, where it's like, this is like, I haven't played. I have a Telecaster on the wall over here that I haven't played in 6 months, because it's just like, it hasn't been. I don't have a string for it.
Yeah, missing
Um,
B string, hang it up,
this is
you know.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't a flex, but more so I guess a missed opportunity on my end. I actually have like the opportunity, like, to work, or I can get strings through Ernie Ball through artist pricing kind of thing. I
Right.
guess you'd call it a string endorsement. I have not ordered once. Not a single time. I can get strings for a really good price. I can get them in bulk, and I have yet to do it. And I don't know why. I
Co-
just have to send an email.
Corey, let me help you with that order. Let me help
Yeah, I
you get that,
know.
let me help you get that
Yeah.
off the table. We'll get that going for you. I can definitely help you there.
Yeah, that's like been on the to-do list for like 8 months. So
Well, look, speaking, just as we start to wrap up though, but I really don't want to, I really want to touch on your band Locket, who I have been listening to a lot lately. And I just, yeah, give us the update. What are you guys up to? I know you just released a song early July, which was a
yep.
Fleetwood Mac cover.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. And you are not strangers to doing cover songs, which is something I love.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I play guitar in a band called Locket, formerly known as Safe to Say. If you have listened this far into the podcast, you heard me talking about the Safe to Say back in 2015, and that's when I joined that band. Basically, we took a little bit of a break and came back, just rebranded and working with a different team, all this stuff. We put out an album called All Out in October of 2019, and it's been received well. It's got 1 million+ streams on Spotify, which is a cool little milestone to have. Um, and yeah, the reception's been good, and we've been able to tour it when during the normal when you're allowed to tour.
Hmm.
We were touring it, and when things come back, we'll still be touring. Um, we also released a cover before we put out the Fleetwood Mac one. We actually released a cover of an Oasis song called "Morning Glory," and yeah, it was received really well. Um,
Which, by the way, it's an incredible cover. I've listened to that song so many times, Corey, and I love it. I love all the breakdown sections that you guys put in it. You did a really good job of it, and yeah, I'm all about that. I'm all about the "What's the Story, Morning Glory" cover. It was good. It was really. Are you guys gonna do that live? Are you gonna tour that one? Do you perform your cover songs?
we haven't. We totally could. I mean, as you know, it's not. You don't need to be able to shred to play that track. It's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Um, no, we've never played it live. Maybe if there's an opportunity, like if we're feeling freaky one day or whatever, we might put it into the set. But yeah, no plans. We actually tracked that a while ago. Like, that came out probably maybe a year after it was recorded, and we tracked it just for fun. When a band's working on an album, you're trying to create, something that's going to stand the test of time. There's just so much thought and pressure that you put on yourselves to make something great, and you're thinking of the aesthetic of it and all this stuff. There's just so much that goes into it. When you're working on a cover, there's no rules. So we recorded over the course of a weekend. There's no drum editing, no drum samples, no vocal tuning, nothing like that. It's just raw performances. We track the drums, we track the bass, we track the guitars, all real amps. We used a JCM 800 clone built by a gentleman named Calvin, who has a company called Calvin McCormick, again, here in Ottawa. And we tracked it in a weekend, mixed it, and then it sat in a Dropbox. It sat on the internet for a long time, and eventually it came out. And yeah, it's been received really well. And yeah, I'm really glad. We had a lot of fun making the intro, like the helicopter sound.
Yes.
So we used a Gig Effects chopper, which is a guitar pedal that was made in the early 2000s, discontinued, and I actually have that was a big part of like Locket and Safe to Say's sound. It's like a tremolo pedal with the rate is on a foot switch, so it's like da 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 da
Oh, nice.
as you like move it. And yeah, so much fun to use live. You just watch people, like, everyone looks at you every time you turn it on because they're like, what's happening?
Mm.
So we use that, like, obviously turning it up and down to create that helicopter effect.
Hmm.
So there was some fun little sound design going on in it. And yeah, and then moving forward, we also released a cover of the song Everywhere by Fleetwood Mac. And if you're familiar with that track, you know that the intro of it has that kind of iconic synth part. And if you're interested in how we made that, I actually made a video on my channel. We used real Roland JX3P, that's behind me. I had to look at the name of it. And yeah, so we used a real like analog synth from 1985 to recreate that sound. And yeah, again, been received well. It's a lot of fun to make those covers, and that's what we're doing. We're working on a couple things that I can't really talk about at the moment, but we're constantly when you play in a band, you're constantly working on stuff, and then it comes out, down the line, and while that's coming out, you're working on something else.
Yeah, it needs to be done for next week. Okay, here it is. Okay, we're gonna release it next year. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's especially with the team we have. It's a lot of like, okay, we create something, it's ready to go, and then, we're told like, okay, we're thinking of this, and then we collaborate a little bit on the game plan of how it comes out, and then it's like, okay, cool.
Nice. Well, Cory, I really can't thank you enough for spending your time today speaking with me and giving us all some insight about, somebody that I feel like has had a touch on all kinds. I mean, I guess everyone that really does end up doing audio production full time does work their way up, don't they? They do work on the
Absolutely.
on the free doors and all that kind of stuff to outboard gear or being in a professional studio. But it's been really great to hear your story and how you've progressed and hear about the things that you're like, oh, I wish I could have done this better, and this is how I learned how to do them better. So a really inspiring episode for me. I'm going to enjoy listening to this back again. Don't forget, folks, to go and check out Cory's YouTube page, his Patreon, his band Locket. There's so much to discover about you, Cory. There's loads of avenues.
Yeah, I try to keep myself busy.
I love it. Well, dude, thanks so much. And yeah, let's speak again real soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.